House Democrats unveiled a secret plan to force the vote on the debt ceiling this week and power through the congressional blockage that has been delaying talks. The strategy, which according to The Hill has been kept hush-hush since January, is, quote, designed to force a vote on a debt limit hike even over the objections of Republican leaders who are demanding trillions of dollars in spending cuts that President Biden has declined to consider.
According to White House economists, an extended debt standoff could wipe out more than 8 million jobs, quote, crater the stock market and cause up to 45% losses. Joining us now to weigh in is Hill Congressional reporter Mychael Schnell. Thanks for being here, Michael.
Thank you guys for having me.
So I guess the first question here would be, what is the likelihood of this actually happening? And by this, I do not mean the implosion and defaulting on our debts, but this specific strategy from the Democrats.
Yeah, so this discharge petition from the Democrats, to put it bluntly, it's a long shot, right? It's a long shot bid. The first reason why I say it's a long shot bid is because there are a lot of steps that Democrats have to take to actually bring a discharge petition to the floor. Now, the good news for Democrats is that they foresaw that there was going to be really an ugly stalemate over the debt limit as we got into the summer months. So they started this process early. Back in January, Congressman Mark DeSaulnier, who is more of a low-key congressman, he introduced this bill that would then be used for the debt limit. And obviously, this was just all introduced this week. So that is one reason, that was one thing the Democrats did do properly and puts them in good standing. But the difficult part now is going to be garnering enough support to actually bring this discharge petition to the floor. Now, the House Democrats will need to get at least a majority of the chamber to support the discharge petition. And of course, the chamber is currently controlled by Republicans. So that means Democrats are going to have to pick off at least 5 Republicans, assuming all Democrats support the effort, in order to force a vote on a debt ceiling increase. Now, that's a very heavy lift, and for a couple of reasons. A, obviously, Democrats and Republicans are very far apart on this issue. Republicans have largely been calling for spending cuts to be associated with any increase in the debt limit. Democrats have been pushing for a clean debt ceiling increase, which means no conditions attached to any hike in the borrowing limit. So that'll be the first reason why it'll be difficult. And then secondly, just in Washington, in this very polarized and hyper-partisan moment, it's difficult to get Democrats and Republicans on board for anything, especially something as high stakes as the debt limit, which has been, we've been in this stalemate for months now. So we'll have to see what happens with the discharge petition. One thing to note is that it's not yet clear how the debt limit would be raised as part of this discharge petition. One would assume it would be a clean increase because that's what Democrats have been pushing for. But Democratic leadership has not yet said the language that would be in that bill to increase the debt limit. So it still remains to be seen if they'll get at least 5 Republicans on board. But nonetheless, it's definitely something to keep an eye on as both sides continue to really dig in their heels in this stalemate.
And Michael, we've had hyper-partisan debt ceiling negotiations in the past. Quite frankly, it seems like we have them more often than not. With that being said, President Biden, former Vice President Biden, has been a leader in conversing with and honestly pulling a lot of Republicans to ensure that America didn't default on its debts in the past. But we know now that in his meeting with top congressional leaders upcoming on May 9th, he is not going to converse about the debt ceiling. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, President Biden is saying that he does not want to discuss the debt ceiling because this is essentially his calculus. He's saying, we're not going to negotiate over the debt ceiling. That should be a clean increase. There's no question about that. But then when it comes to some of these spending cuts that House Republicans are pushing for, Democrats are fine with discussing those and negotiating them and talking them over. They just want to do that as part of the appropriations process when putting together a budget for fiscal year 2024. So that's essentially what the Democratic stance has been. Whether or not they will remain resolute in that remains to be seen. You mentioned Tuesday's meeting, May 9th, a very high stakes meeting between the big 4 congressional leaders, Schumer, McCarthy, McConnell, and Jeffries, in addition to the president at the White House. A lot of eyeballs will be on that meeting to see what comes out of it, if either side gives a little bit. But look, someone's going to have to give as we get closer to that June 1st deadline, which is the earliest date that Janet Yellen said the U.S. could run out of its money to default on its loans, because any measure that is used to raise the debt limit will have to be bipartisan because, of course, the 60-vote threshold needed in the Senate. So both sides are going to have to come together in some way. It just remains to be seen how that will be.
Yeah, you know, Biden has said he's not going to negotiate. As you just mentioned, he says he supports a clean hike on the debt ceiling. Of course, that's not what he said back in 1984, where he said, I cannot agree to a vote for a full increase in the debt without any assurance the steps will be taken early next year to reduce the alarming increase in deficits and debt. That was Joe Biden back in 1984. But let's leave that aside for now. How has the actual political calculus and sort of negotiating and horse trading changed because Republicans were actually able to pass this increase in the debt limit, yes, with all of their sort of negotiating items that they want attached? It seems to me it's really changed the calculus because now, you know, Speaker McCarthy can say, we passed a debt limit increase. We're not the ones holding the country hostage. Now you are. Is Joe Biden going to change that position, that he's just only not going to negotiate over a clean debt limit?
So the fact that House Republicans passed that bill last month that would raise the debt limit by $1.5 trillion or through March 2024, whichever comes first, and it would also implement $4.8 trillion in spending cuts. That was a significant development for two reasons. A, it now gives House Republicans an opportunity to put pressure on Democrats, and particularly the Senate, to do something about the debt limit. House Republicans have been saying that they are the only ones who have actually put forward legislation to increase the debt limit, and they're trying to use that fact now to, again, put pressure on Democrats to make a move and put pressure on the Senate. Speaker McCarthy has said to the Senate multiple times, either take up our bill, or if you don't like our bill, show us something else. Show us your plan. So for starters, it was significant in that sense. But the second reason why that piece of legislation was significant is because it kind of puts a marker in the sand for Kevin McCarthy, right? A number of conservative Republicans before and after that bill passed saying so that this was their starting point. You know, they would not support any legislation that had less spending cuts, that was less robust than this piece of legislation. And that could pose a real issue for McCarthy because, again, anything that goes over the finish line is going to need bipartisan support. Democrats are not going to be able to swallow that bill or those spending cuts. And even some more moderate and centrist House Republicans are likely not going to support something that has larger spending cuts than that bill that we saw House Republicans pass. So this will potentially put Kevin McCarthy in a bit of a difficult situation. And then sort of the dark cloud hanging over all this is the motion to vacate, right? If we remember back in January, Kevin McCarthy had conceded to the request of some conservatives to bring the threshold for the motion to vacate, which essentially forces a vote on ousting the speaker, down to one member. That means if just one frustrated Republican is not happy with how McCarthy is handling these debt limit negotiations, they can force a vote on ousting the speaker, and that could put Kevin McCarthy's speakership in jeopardy. So that piece of legislation was significant for a number of reasons, but it also sort of gives you a sense of some issues that could be on the horizon when we talk about this debt limit issue.
Thanks for joining us, Michael, and we will keep a close eye on this, acknowledging that so many things are on the table, from VA benefits to food stamps to health care, you name it. More rising after this.